Have you discovered Gaia.com yet? Stream the largest library of consciousness-expanding videos, ad-free and member-supported. See the links in the description below for more details and a special sign-up offer. Start your journey for only 99 cents.
On July 29, 1953, John O'Neill, science editor for the New York Tribune, discovered a 12-mile-long bridge in the area on the moon known as 𝗪𝗃𝗧𝗧𝗓. He contacted the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers with this finding. While O'Neill said in public it was a natural phenomena, the fact that it just suddenly appeared called into question whether the bridge was artificial. As soon as he announced this discovery, O'Neill was attacked by skeptical scientists. That was until famed British astronomer H.P. Wilkins confirmed that he too had seen the mysterious bridge. Later, astronomer Patrick Moore also reported seeing the structure. What is very odd about this strange story is that the bridge slowly began to disappear as if it were morphing into the surface of the moon. Now today, there is no trace of what these famous astronomers saw. In the 1960s, NASA compiled a list of strange sightings on the moon as seen by reputable astronomers going back to the dawn of the telescope, called a chronological catalog of lunar events. The report reveals hundreds of strange objects moving on the surface, with odd lights seen in the dark of the moon, and even clouds and mists streaming across its exterior. Our nearest neighbor in space, the moon, has long baffled scientists. When considered, it is truly one of the more enigmatic members of our solar system. These oddities include the fact that the moon and the Earth are the largest planet-moon system in the solar system, the moon being about 1/4 the size of the Earth. The moon has an odd orbit, which means that the same side of the moon is always facing Earth.
3 feet per second, 40 feet.
No one but the astronauts have actually ever seen the far side of the moon with their own eyes.
It also, interestingly enough, has a tidal lock with the Earth. The moon orbits the Earth and it always faces the Earth the same way. Now, you may not have thought about this before, but what's one of the interesting things that happens with that? You could always do things on the back side of the moon. You could do very elaborate construction projects. You could have very bright things going on. All these bright buildings, highways, roads. It could look like Manhattan. There'd be all these ships coming and going, and you would never see it because you only see one side facing the Earth.
Perhaps one of the oddest coincidences is the strange fact that the moon and the sun, from the perspective of the Earth, appear to be the same size. That's because the moon is 1/400th the size of the sun, and is exactly 1/400th the distance between the Earth and the sun. This is what gives us solar eclipses, where we can see this incredible coincidence for ourselves.
Not only does it rotate in such a way as to always keep one face to the Earth, which is unusual enough, but possibly explained. But even stranger still is that when the moon eclipses the disk of the sun and transits it, it's a perfect eclipse. Our moon is of such a size and distance from the Earth that during an eclipse, the disk of the moon is transiting the disk of the sun. And during the complete eclipse, the moon disk is perfectly, not more and not less, covering the disk of our sun. Now that our moon is arbitrarily in that orbit to not more or not less eclipse the sun, but to perfectly eclipse the sun, would suggest that our moon is actually in an artificial orbit around our planet. Because to just capture some moon or even that it would just form, as the planet forms, in that orbit and that size, the odds are 1,000,000,000 to 1.
There are some very strange anomalies about the moon's orbit that are undeniable. And one of them is that the apparent diameter of the moon and the apparent diameter of our sun from Earth is almost precisely the same. And you might say, well, that's not a big deal, but the interesting point is that it causes this corona phenomenon to occur when we have a total solar eclipse. You see this perfect ring of light around the moon. Now, what are the likelihoods that that could be strictly a function of chance? It seems very, very small.
The moon, I believe, is tidal locked in orbit, which, by the way, is very rare in our solar system, number one. Proves to me intelligent placement. And I think for two reasons. The first reason being, in order to sustain life on this planet in a way that makes it extremely comfortable for sentient beings like ourselves, you need to have a stabilizer to keep the Earth from rocking on its axis, number one, because you would have severe storms, severe wind gusts in different places, tides would run up into the land and destroy property and so forth. The moon actually really balances out the Earth's weather and everything else. A lot of people don't know that. The second, I think, and most important reason is because when you're tidally locked, what happens is the moon, from our perspective on Earth, you only see one side of the face, and it rotates at the same speed as the Earth is rotating, so we only get to see that same side. So what it allows is for clandestine operations on what they call the dark side of the moon, which really is not dark. We call it dark because it's on the far side that we can't see, but technically, because the moon has its own rotation on its own axis, all sides of the moon actually see the sun. So there really is no dark side of the moon, but the far side of the moon is where potentially there is clandestine operations, maybe even ancient bases, maybe even now current bases there that are now kept away from human eyes here on Earth.
The moon and the Earth are a weird system because they're so close in size. And so it's really rare for a body as small as the Earth, with as minimal a gravitational field as it has, to be able to actually lock a body like that into a tidal lock arrangement. It's very easy for Saturn and Jupiter, which are much more massive, to be able to maybe grab an object or even fission off a moon and keep it in a tidal locked relationship. So I wonder, when I see that, if maybe it wasn't moved in place and the Earth actually sort of robbed it of its spin momentum at some point, to the point that it now shows only one side of itself to the Earth. But it doesn't seem like an arrangement that could have come about naturally. It just doesn't really add up.
Scientists cannot agree on the origins of the moon. There are several theories, but none of them adequately explains everything concerning the moon. The first is the fission theory, which says that a chunk of the Earth broke off and condensed into the moon. The problem with this theory is that it does not explain the 4,000-degree baking that the moon's surface endured at some point in its past. If the moon had formed nearby the Earth, then our planet would have gone through this baking heat also, but there's no evidence for this on Earth. The second theory is the capture theory, in which the Earth somehow captured the moon as it was whizzing by. The problem with this theory is that it's unlikely, because it would have had to happen in a very exact way, otherwise the moon would have crashed into the Earth. The third theory is the condensation theory, that says the Earth and the moon condensed at the same time from material in the solar system. The problem with this theory is that if it were true, the moon would be as dense as the Earth. The fourth and most recent theory is that a planet like Mars crashed into the Earth, breaking off a chunk, which then reformed into the moon. The problem here is that the isotopes for the Earth and the moon are identical. This would not be the case if a planet had crashed into the Earth. So science is left in a quandary considering how the moon was created and how it arrived here. The biggest concern was the fact that the moon's density is far less than that of Earth. Though the moon is a little less than a third the size of the Earth, it weighs far less. The Earth is 81 times heavier than the moon. It is this fact that baffles scientists the most.
Of course, there's several different theories about how the moon was formed. One of them is that the Earth was hit by a Mars-sized object and all the stuff went out and gathered together at this particular orbit and then started circling around the Earth. But the bottom line is, if you actually look at the data, you can see that the moon is actually receding from the Earth, indicating that it may have actually been fissioned off by the Earth at one point. And the fact is that right now there's no really good theories for how the moon got there. We know the capture theory doesn't work. The fission theory has some issues, although it's my favorite, and the collision theory is just absolute nonsense because of the fact that the isotopic ratios of the lunar soil that we brought back, the elements in it, they match the Earth. That indicates that they're not from somewhere else. You'd have a mixture if the moon was actually formed from the Earth itself and another alien body.
In 1970, Michael Vassin and Alexander Sherbakov of the Soviet Academy of Sciences advanced a hypothesis that the moon was a spaceship built by extraterrestrials or possibly humans in the past. The article, published in Sputnik magazine, was titled, "Is the Moon the Creation of Alien Intelligence?" Their theory relies on the idea that large lunar craters, which are thought to be created from meteor impact, are generally far too shallow and have flat or even convex bottoms. The two scientists theorize that large meteors are drilling through the rocky layer and hitting an armored hull underneath the surface of the moon.
Another very compelling notion is the idea that the craters are not deep enough. We see these large mares, as they're called, these large seas, and if you look at the so-called man on the moon, you're looking at the moon when it's full, you see these dark areas, which some people stylize as a face. Those dark areas are actually not very deep compared to the rest of the moon, and what these Russian scientists who wrote a paper about the moon being hollow in the 1970s concluded was that the craters do not blast out enough material. It's as if they're hitting something really solid, and where you see these mares, you're actually getting much closer to the skin of this surface. So whatever hits it, it's bouncing off of something that's a lot more solid than the regolith, which is the moon dust on the surface. And it's actually causing these craters to be very wide and shallow. They don't have any depth.
There were two Russian scientists saying that they believed that the moon was a constructed body. They thought that it was a planetoid that had been hollowed out, and everything that was going on, basically, apart from some stuff on the surface on the far side of the moon, is going on inside. What they were describing, long before it actually became fact in the Star Wars movies, was the Death Star. That's what they were describing in 1970.
So it's things like this that make certain astronomers think, and researchers, that yeah, our moon is some kind of artificial satellite, like George Lucas' Death Star, put into our orbit around our planet. Not to destroy us, as in the Star Wars Death Star movies, but as a satellite to watch us and as literally a base to observe Earth.
Or is it possible we can find out-of-place artifacts in other places, maybe like the moon? Well, something very interesting has happened. In the year 2016, so very, very recently, NASA has released its entire archive of lunar images, images taken of the lunar surface from the Apollo missions all the way from 1961 when they began through 1972. There are things on these images that NASA cannot explain, so they are called anomalous images. Some of them are so anomalous that they have been pixelated out so that we can't really see what they are, but we can still see the pixels. So there's something happening on the moon, and I want you to see some of these images, just a couple of them. I was an amateur archaeologist when I was in college. And one of the things, the very first things that I learned as an archaeologist is this. When we see 90-degree angles on an archaeological site, that tells us that it is in fact an archaeological site, that it is not a natural formation. Nature does not erode with wind in 90-degree angles, or nature does not erode through a stream or a river in 90-degree angles. So when you see a 90-degree angle like you're seeing on your screen right now, this is an excavated archaeological site that we're seeing an aerial view, and it's very clear to see the red lines are showing us where that 90-degree angle is. The next image that you're seeing, this is from the surface of the moon, and this is among the images that NASA released. You're seeing on the lower right-hand portion of the screen, you can see what looks like a little cube, and then in the upper right-hand portion, you're seeing what definitely is an enlargement of that cube. Those are definitely 90-degree angles. They are definitely made intentionally. They are not the result of erosion. The question is, what are they doing on the moon? We have been led to believe that the moon is a sterile surface, that there is no life existing on the moon, nor has there ever been. So when we begin to see things like this, and again, these images from 1961 through 1972, what do they mean? Well, if it was only one image, you'd say maybe it's just a trick of light, or a trick of light in shadow. But it's not just one image. I want you to see some of the other images that NASA is releasing. The Clementine mission to the moon came later, after the Apollo missions. So Clementine was a separate mission that went back to the moon, maybe to look a little closer at some of the anomalies that Apollo was seeing. And it's the Clementine images that we're finding pixelated, although they are released to the public. So you're seeing one now. There's obviously something here in the image that you're seeing that for whatever reason, we're not being allowed to see. What could that be on the surface of the moon? What is the out-of-place artifact that we're not seeing? Here's another one that looks more like some kind of a tower, perhaps, of some kind, or an obelisk that's been pixeled out. These are from the Clementine mission. Now, when people see things like this on the moon, the first thing that comes to mind is aliens, ETs, UFOs, things like that. And I fully believe, I'm certain, that we are not alone in this universe. It would make no sense for us to be. And that there's an overwhelming body of evidence suggesting now that other life forms have been with us for a very long time, both in our world and in other worlds. The astronauts have talked about this, those that have been interviewed. But I'm going to give you just a little bit different perspective. We are living a time of extremes. We are living a time when the cycles of conflict are ramping up. You don't need me to tell you that. You can feel the tension in the world, the push toward war. Doesn't mean that war needs to happen, but there are multiple places and hotspots where you can see right now, it wouldn't take much to create that. Okay, at the same time, something else is happening. During the Cold War years, there were only two nations that had the money and the technology to go to the moon. It's the former USSR, former Soviet Union, and the former United States of America. And I have to say that because both nations are so broke right now that we're not going back to the moon, at least in the way that we have in the past. But there are other nations that are going to the moon. During the Cold War, even though the former Soviet Union and former United States of America were at war on one level, it was a very civilized war in some respects because there were agreements among scientists on other levels. One of those agreements was that things that were found on the moon, for whatever reason, were not publicly shared among the people of the earth at the time. And I'm not going to say it's right, wrong, good, or bad. There were research programs that said that certain kinds of information could disrupt the fabric of society and overturn religious beliefs. And again, it was another world. This was the 60s and the 70s. But the point is, those agreements were honored, and I think that's one of the reasons we're not seeing some of these images. The nations that are now on their way to the moon, the nations that have the money and the technology and the will to return, were not part of those agreements. China, for example, India, are both on their way to the moon. And both nations have said that when they land on the moon, they will televise to the people of the earth whatever it is that they find live as they find it. Here's why I believe this is important. And this is a place where I'm moving beyond peer-reviewed science. I'm sharing with you my perspective, my sense, my belief. When we find those out-of-place artifacts on the moon, when we find archaeological remnants of intentional civilization in a place where we used to be hoping to find microbes. We were looking for life, hoping to find microscopic life, and now we're finding entire temple complexes is what appears to be on those images. When we find those, my sense is that we're going to discover something that could be the most powerful, the most unifying experience the people, our global family, the people of Earth could ever have. Because my sense is that when we go into those ancient sites, we're going to find the hieroglyphs on the walls. We're going to find writing in languages that we already know. In the original languages called root languages of the earth: Hebrew, Sanskrit, cuneiform, Arabic. And the reason we're finding them there is because those sites are not necessarily alien ET UFO sites. I believe they are sites that were developed by us from another cycle of another civilization. When we worked together as a family on this planet, when we cooperated and achieved great and beautiful things. And my question is, if we were able to do things like that in the past, how much further could we go if we did the same thing right now with what we know today? Here's the beauty. Here we are on the verge of war at a time when the cycles are converging, creating the tension in a time of extremes. And at exactly that time, we may find the evidence of us from another time that has the power to unify us rather than divide us. And I think we're going to see that very soon in our lifetimes. So what would that mean? What would it mean if we found something like that? And when we look at the advanced civilizations on Earth, why did those civilizations collapse? What happened in the past? Is there something that could have happened then that we've forgotten? Or maybe we chose to forget because whatever it was so painful, we didn't want to carry it in the future civilizations. Well, I want to share with you another out-of-place artifact, an ancient clue that is happening in what is now Pakistan. It is in an area, used to be between India and Pakistan, ancient sites, archaeological sites, such as Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa. We've known about these sites for a while. They're about 5,000 years before present is when we say they originated. Interestingly, it's the beginning of the last cycle. It also happens to be at the time of the last great climate change. What we're finding is evidence of an advanced society. An advanced society that had things in their time that we have in ours today. They had knowledge of mathematics, chemistry, architecture, advanced architecture, multi-story buildings. They had closed indoor plumbing, hot and cold running water, flush toilets, stained glass in their windows. They even had buried pipelines where there have been wires and remnants of cables and what are believed to be ancient batteries have been found in these sites. So clearly, these were not primitive grass huts. These were advanced technological civilizations, and they had more. They had amazing art, beautiful art, using techniques of sculpture that we're only beginning to use now in the 20th century. But there are a lot of mysteries in these sites. Scientists, archaeologists also began to find evidence of what is called vitrified stone. What that means is that in the walls of the homes, for example, or in the floors made of quartz or granite that is made of quartz and feldspar and mica, some of the minerals, while they're still in place, they've been exposed to a heat that was so intense it melted the minerals in place. A high, intense, rapid heat that melted these minerals in place. And one of the mysteries, the archaeologists began to find these mysterious lumps of something. And it took them a while to understand that what they were looking at, these were lumps of clay that used to be clay vases and clay dolls that had also been vitrified. They were exposed to a rapid, intense heat. They were melted so quickly. All that's left now is a stone ball. So these kinds of things are the mysteries to the scientists. They're saying, what happened? What could have happened in this part of the world? Well, this is one of those places where you have to look beyond the evidence. If you look only at the evidence, you'll never understand what it is that happened. We need context. And some of that context is coming from the oral traditions of this part of the world, from the Hindu traditions of the Mahabharata, and specifically in the Bhagavad Gita, which is a small portion of the Mahabharata. This portion of the Mahabharata tells a story of an ancient battle that happened between two advanced civilizations a long time ago. It doesn't give the exact dates. And as these two civilizations clashed, one of them began to lose the battle, and they resorted to using a weapon that had never been used before, a technology that had never been used before. And they wrote about what the effects of this weapon were in a way that made no sense until the 20th century, because we had nothing to compare it to. What could have been seen in the eyes of the people living in Mohenjo-Daro 5,000 years ago to prompt them to describe something that made no sense until the 20th century? Does Mohenjo-Daro offer evidence of the unthinkable? And this is a question that scientists are asking themselves right now.
You are always doing something special. You don't stop, do you?
That's what life is about. You got to do great things.
My God, you've done the Hollow Earth. You're working on that project. You're working on so many others. Now you've got a mission of getting us back to the moon in Mars. What's going on?
Well, I've been interested in this since I was a little kid. In 1968, I was interviewed by a newspaper in Southern California where I lived. And they asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I didn't hesitate. I said I wanted to be an asteroid miner. Well, what does an interviewer do with that?
Sure.
Right? So the idea that we're going to go beyond the atmosphere to the moon, it seems like a desert in a vacuum. You know, why are we going to go there? I still have people ask me that today. Why would we go there when you have so many problems here? And the solutions, the benefits of going to the moon are just off the chain, especially now with our capabilities.
Sure. We last went there with a manned mission in 1972. Why'd we stop?
We had actually 2 more launch engines, all paid for,
ready to go. Ready to go.
With primary and secondary crews. And we decided not to go back.
Why?
Because of NASA. NASA is an administration. It is a bureaucracy. And it is therefore driven by the politics of Washington, D.C. Once space travel became blasé, if you can imagine that.
People lost interest.
They lost interest. The politicians wanted to move money elsewhere. And they really didn't see any benefits of continuously coming home with a bunch of rocks. So they just went another direction.
Are we going to get back there, Brooks?
Well, that's a good question. In the past, we have relied upon governments. Governments raise taxes, they put the taxes toward the programs, bureaucrats siphon off the money, and about 10 times over budget, we finally get there.
Yes.
Now, it's a little bit different. Now we see the return on investment is very, very high. With SpaceX,
it's privatization.
This is a private company that is getting in the space business, and they're making money. They're making about $4 to $12 million profit per launch.
Wow.
This has created, well, it has validated a new business model.
And they're going up cheaper than when NASA was doing it.
Oh, absolutely, because there's no bureaucracy. One of the recent decisions that they made, which was just brilliant, they did all this testing on different kinds of carbon fiber and special polymers to build a hull. And they found that, yes, it was lighter, but it was more expensive. It was a long time building. So they went back to stainless steel, a stainless steel starhopper. You could never do that in the government. That would just never happen. The one thing about the government you can rely on is it is a 5-year-long supertanker. And once it begins moving through the water, it can't turn.
You're stuck with it.
That's it.
But we're doing it now. And privatization, I assume you think, is fantastic.
Yes. In fact, I'm meeting with 6 asteroid mining companies beginning next month. I'm going to be looking at their technology, their capabilities, their goals. Some of them are duplicating, not many. There have already been mergers. Some of these got started up with blockchain, and they've now come out of the blockchain and gone into real dollars. And they're building serious hardware, Bigelow, Google, companies that we recognize, but also some we don't. And they're building life support systems, they're building docking systems, they're building mainframes, and the biggest innovations are in propulsion.
That's dramatic, isn't it?
It is.
And re-entry rockets.
Well, we're not thinking, returnable rockets.
Yeah.
And that's brilliant. I mean, anybody that's watched the videos.
That saves a lot of money.
It does. It does. It's incredible. You could turn them around in a couple of weeks and right back up again.
Your quest to want us to, go back to the moon would be what, for mining purposes?
Yes, and for new energy. Because the moon has in great supply several things. First of all, it has a lot of volatile compounds that are difficult to produce here. We have to produce them with oil.
Okay.
We have to refine them and crack them, and it's polluting. But they exist in the lower areas of craters on the moon because it's dark and it's cold, and they exist in liquid form or even solid form. And those volatile compounds can be recovered and used for further space exploration. And helium-3.
What is helium-3, Brooks?
Helium-3 is a compound of helium that's light a neutron. It exists on Earth, but in small amounts.
Okay.
Most of the helium we have here is helium-4. To get helium-3, you've got to get it from volcanoes because it exists mostly in the inside of the Earth. But on the moon, it's plentiful everywhere. And what it could basically be used for is to replace fissile materials like uranium and cesium in our nuclear power plants to generate electricity, except no more radiation.
That's huge.
Absolutely.
You don't have to worry about a Fukushima disaster.
Correct. And if you bring a shipping container of helium-3 back and convert the nuclear power plant, instead of a 3-year fuel supply, you have a 30-year fuel supply.
Will it be NASA that gets us back to the moon?
Absolutely not.
You don't think so?
No, I don't think any one government can handle it now, because we realize when we did go to the moon, we were really lucky. The magnetosphere behaved itself, the solar flares behaved themselves. We didn't lose anybody. All the astronauts lived to be ripe old ages. Now it's a little bit different. Our atmosphere is different, the magnetosphere is different. We don't want to lose anybody because it's valuable. What we want to do is bring the money home.
You know, it's funny, Brooks, they act like we never went to the moon.
Yeah.
It's like it's all over. It's starting all over again, isn't it?
Well, I kind of benefited from the first whole moon venture, because when it ended, NASA dissolved the greatest brain trust the world had ever built.
And some of them went to SpaceX and all these other companies.
And some of them came to universities. I took industrial technology from a former NASA engineer. So all the universities benefited from that as well. But the overall world suffered. The space race they talk about today really has 3 lanes. It has an economic lane, which SpaceX and other companies...
That's what they smell, right?
Yeah, sure. I mean, a single asteroid, a single haul could be worth $300 to $400 billion. This is a great payday. The second is governmental. Obviously, the high ground is what you want in any military situation. And I've said for a long, long time, maybe 4 decades, he who controls the moon will control the Earth. But the third one is kind of, it taps into the nature of humanity itself. Are we explorers or are we warriors? And the answer is, we're explorers. Every time Earth has had a frontier, man has done well.
Yes.
Man has explored into those frontiers, developed those frontiers. Those colonies broke off from the main government that was running the world at the time, and the entire world benefited. We are out of frontiers on this world. The only frontier left is the bottom of the sea, and we're not fighting wars over that. We're not moving people to the bottom of the ocean. That frontier is 2 days away, 2 days away, and there are billions of dollars hanging in the balance. I don't think any one government can make it, but they're going to try. Not only China, not only Russia. We recently had an unsuccessful launch from India. Everything went well. They did things step by step. They went into orbit around the Earth. They went from Earth to the moon, went to orbit around the moon, and then they splatted on the surface.
Trial and error. They'll get it eventually.
Well, we want less error.
Yes.
We want more return on investment.
Should we be working as a joint effort with the planet as opposed to these individual companies or countries?
Well, this is the dynamic of humanity. If you look at it from that standpoint, we are on the threshold of an era of perhaps 1,000 years of peace. If we come together as Earth and quit marching at one another with our tribal flags about what resources we have here, let's turn our sights to the stars, or at least to the moon, to Mars, and maybe the asteroid belt, and that's enough frontier for 1,000 years.
Brooks, do you think the asteroid belt was a planet that blew up, or what could have been a planet that never formed?
I don't think it's the latter. I think probably you're looking at a planet that was there in orbit. It had a catastrophic collision with something.
Something happened.
Broke into a bunch of chunks and stayed in the same orbit.
Now, when we talk about asteroids approaching the planet or zooming by Earth, did they all originate from the asteroid belt, or are they coming in from outside the solar system?
No, they come in from the Kuiper belt or the Oort cloud. Asteroids do not usually get out of their behavior and come zooming through the solar system. Meteors do, and comets do, but asteroids are pretty good size gravitational bodies in and of themselves. And so they pretty much stay in that cloud. Outside of that, there are millions of bodies out there, ranging in size from a lunchbox to a city block, that can get bumped or create a collision or somehow fall out of orbit and come, crossing other orbits. But
if you were given one project to accomplish, the budget, everything, what would that project be?
Wow. Well, I would like to create probably a habitat on the moon to be able to facilitate heavy lifting from there.
Right.
Launching things from the moon or from the orbit of the moon is way easier than launching them from the Earth.
In terms of gravitational pull and everything else?
Right, overcoming the gravitational pull of the moon, having the raw materials, not putting human life on the surface at risk every single time you launch, every single time you come back.
Brooks, is space the final frontier?
Maybe. Other dimensions maybe beyond that, but we're meant to be free. We're meant to be explorers. We're meant to dream large and to do everything we can do to try to accomplish those dreams.
Will 2024 show us a Mars mission?
Maybe on the paper. I don't think it's going to happen by 2024.
You don't?
No, I think
All right.
the risk is too high.
But can we? Can we do it? I mean, we went there 50 years ago.
We have put rovers on there, and most of them have been successful beyond our wildest imagination. I was talking with Dr. Jim Bell, who ran the Opportunity and Spirit rovers on Mars, and he was, didn't know what to do once they exceeded their mission life. They were then given back to Caltech. Caltech let grad students, develop research projects with them until their life expectancy was over. But it was, magnificently successful project.
Beyond anything they could imagine.
Absolutely.
That's exciting. We have the capability and the mental know-how to do these things you've been talking about.
Yes, we do.
That's what's so exciting.
I'm excited about meeting with these private companies that are really building things like, docking systems,
yes,
habitats. Bigelow has done amazing things.
Floating hotels, right?
Inflatable spacecraft.
Yeah.
And the innovations that he's made in multi-layering Kevlar and other materials has created an almost micrometeor immune habitat
from
that
getting
we can put in space.
Pelted.
Sure.
Is he making money on space yet?
I think so, yeah. They're all making money. There's profit to be made. Everything that's been going up on the private side has been making money. And they're doing it for less cost than what the government
Are
did
there
in the
any
past.
private Chinese companies doing things, Brooks, or is it all government?
I don't think there's any such thing as a private Chinese company. I've been working with them for a long, long time, and many of the private companies in China all answer to the Chinese government.
What comes first with our next move? The Space Force?
That is a very good step in the right direction, because what it shows is official endorsement that space actually exists. I think we're going to still have to overcome the public stigma. What in the world are we going to space if we have homeless, living on the streets?
Which has always been an argument.
It's always been an argument. The benefits far outweigh the risks. And in any business venture, that's what you're looking for. Yes, it might cost $100 million to pull it off, but if you can make $200 million doing it, I'll do that 3 times a week.
It's worth it for somebody.
Absolutely.
What's the next big dramatic thing that we will find out about, in your opinion?
In space exploration? Yeah. Well, the testing of the ion thrusters, I think, has been the most innovative. Recently, there was a contest where ion thrusters were tested. One of the thrusters was not tested because they didn't think it would work. They finally were shamed into hooking it up, and it worked. And the remarkable thing about this thruster is it requires no fuel.
No fuel.
No fuel. The particles pop into this dimension from another dimension. They are then charged and pushed out the back, which creates the thrust. Nobody thought this was possible. But this is so innovative, it's going to change the way we travel in space.
If you enjoyed this, make sure to watch the next video on AwakenZone. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell, but you won't want to miss what's coming next.